A lot of people think that understanding color is the secret of masterful painting. And while it's true that understanding color is critical, and something we'll get into in great detail later, when it comes to painting, understanding value is more important than color. How do I know? Let's look at this black and white photo. There's no color in this image, but you can tell exactly what it is. If it is blue, you can still tell exactly what it is. The color choice is arbitrary when painting something realistically. In any color or in no color, you can still tell what it is. What about vice versa? Or vice versa, as my grandma used to say. Let's see it in color. It's actual color. The color in real life is called local color. That's a good term to remember. With local color, it's easy and obvious to see what's going on. Now, let's change the values. It quickly becomes incoherent. If we make it all too light or too dark, we can't see it. If we make some parts light and other parts dark, it doesn't make any sense. It turns out that value is essential to the way our brains construct meaning. So when it comes to painting observationally, it's more important to understand the value of the thing you are trying to paint than its color. Unfortunately, this is not always easy. Color is beautiful, seductive, and often quite loud. According to neurobiologist Margaret Livingstone, the human brain actually has two separate processes for understanding value and understanding color. When the color is really bright or intense, it almost short-circuits our ability to see value. Let's test this out for ourselves. What happens when you look at this image? Does it appear to be pulsing or vibrating? Your brain uses value to help place things in space. When you have two values that are the same, they appear to be located in a similar space. When your brain sees two different colors that are a similar value, it notices the difference, but then can't place them in space due to the similar values. That's when you start to have this vibrating effect. Your brain is switching back and forth, trying to decide which color is in front and which color is in back. So unless you want your paintings to induce motion sickness in your audience, you'll want to have a solid knowledge of value before you begin to work with color. And that starts with seeing value in the things you want to paint. How is this possible when your brain is yelling color so loudly you can't hear the value? The most boring answer is to practice. The best piece of advice I can give you as an artist is to pay attention. Pay attention to the subtlety of light and shadow that exists all around you. Pay attention to how dark one shadow is next to another. Pay attention to the edge of a shadow. Is it a sharp, crisp, clean edge? Or is it fuzzy and blurry, gradually getting lighter? Pay attention to where lights are coming from. What part of an object is closest to the light source? Pay attention to the shape of highlights reflected on an object. Can you tell which light source they are reflecting? I understand this takes extra effort. This level of detail is not what your brain evolved to pay attention to. Your brain is actually making a 3D visual model from the vast amounts of sensory data it is streaming in constantly. It doesn't have enough processing power to reproduce all the data it's receiving, and so it streamlines the process. It doesn't show you what you don't need to know for your survival or the perpetuation of your genes. That may be a slight exaggeration, but my point is you have to consciously override your brain's attempt to streamline what you are seeing and start noticing the subtle detail that is otherwise useless for survival. Think about the color spectrum, for example. The sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can see, ROYGBIV, ROYGBIV, also known as the sum total of all colors in the known universe visible to humanity, is 1%. 1%. What a tiny portion of reality is getting into our brain. And that's just light. The same can be said for sound, smells, tastes. All of our senses have a very narrow range of what's out there. We experience a tiny portion of reality, and your brain is trying to make it even smaller. But you can get in the habit of noticing these types of things, and the more you paint, the more you will notice. And the more you notice, the better you will paint. It's an upward spiral of joy and learning. Another way to see values is to cheat. You might have a phone in your hand or in your pocket right now. You can quickly take a picture of something and then desaturate it, change it to black and white. Now you can instantly see the value differences. When my students use a photographic reference, I usually prefer for them to work from a black and white image. That way, they get practice seeing and understanding values. And they also get practice coming up with their own color palettes. While it is really helpful to practice color matching, I think practicing value matching with colors can be even more helpful. Let's look at a grayscale. Most grayscales have 10 steps. That's pretty easy to work with. The number of steps is arbitrary though. A grayscale could have 100 or 1,000 steps, or even more. It's excellent practice to make a grayscale. Try making a 10-step grayscale with an equal amount of change between each step, a 10% increase for each step. One side being white, the other being black, and each step in between. Different pigments and different brands have different strengths, so it's important to get to know the paints you have. Sometimes a tiny bit of one paint will have a huge impact when mixed with another. Sometimes it feels like you have to keep adding more and more and more until it makes a difference. These types of value scales can also be built with colors, and we'll discuss that in a future lesson. For now, go ahead and stick with practicing grayscale. If you're like me, you'll probably nod along and be like, yeah, I'll practice that, and then never do. I totally get that. I'd rather paint something more interesting myself. But I have to tell you, being forced to do this in school was really good for me. I do remember being so bored by a straight scale, I turned it into a design problem and made flags out of them by painting the scales in horizontal stripes on a rectangle and a square in the top left so it resembled an American flag. So if there's something interesting you can do with the grayscale, you'll have more fun and you'll learn more doing it. Let's go to the studio to start practicing our value techniques.